Peace. Good rising, everyone. Good rising, good rising, good rising. Chief, you out here? Yeah, yeah. Okay, we got a couple people in. So, as always, I will that everybody is nice and rested. You know what I mean? And moving through it, moving and grooving, but moving through it like you're supposed to. You know, and one of the things I wanted to check in on, without you necessarily giving me too much information, but I will that you've been able to, and I trust that you've been able to work with the symbol that you were able to see recently. When we decided to look. Thank you, Kashia. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh man, let me see if I can get these alarms off. I don't think so. I'm gonna have to leave it as it is. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, so willfully there be no more alarms. Yeah, Peace Sister Manera, Information, Nikki Love, Shadow Book, Tahuti L, Miss Cindy Jones, Wild Girl. Good dawning to you. Good dawning to you all. Yeah, what I was just saying a second ago was, I will that you've had some sort of interaction, Peace Face, John Jr., that you've had some sort of interaction with the symbols that you were able to see, from your crown. Peace, Naya. Good rise to you. That you were able to interact with those symbols and those ideas, since we've kind of taken a look. Sometimes the interaction is subliminal. Sometimes it's not always that you sit down and do a ritual or a meditation per se, but sometimes just the acknowledge of seeing them, recognizing them, you start to see a different variety and diversity of night vision that comes to you. So yeah, I just wanted to check in with you and see if you've been able to, explore and intimate a bit more with that symbol that came to you. You know? Yeah, very good with assisting and remaining in the present and being still. Good, 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 Kashia. Peace Plant OG, and I think I saw Sherelle Cunningham. Yeah, so peace to you all. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just willing that that exercise was helpful. I see it was for Kashia, but that you've been able to connect with yourself. Peace, YG Gutter. Yeah, yeah, peace, YG Gutter. Yeah, I meant to tell you too, man. I actually listened to your music. I was gonna do a little listening party. Maybe I'll do that another day to let the people hear your songs too. But I listened to your stuff probably a couple of strongs ago, and I just didn't mention it. Yeah, peace, Barbara Cruz. Good rise to you. Good rise to you. But yeah, man, a part of knowing your symbols, and knowing aren't you proud of your music? Why'd you cut it? Like, I mean, why would you have it out? You surprised? It's there to be listened to, right? You know. But you know, so yeah, like when you're building the temple, if you will, if you're building, those sacred edifices, oh, you was low vibrating when you did that music. Well, you're still low vibrating in it. That's how you perceive it because the music is still out. It's still sending out vibrations. It's still sending out waves. It's perpetual. So I mean, if you're saying you were low vibrating then, it's still low vibrating. You know. Peace James Gatabaki. Peace Shannon. You know. But peace Tanika. Peace Logan. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so maybe like I said, maybe do a listening, John. Peace, brother Vermont, Baba Utu. Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. Peace to all. You know, but yeah, when you're exploring those type of sacred symbols, or your own sacred symbol, your own song. In many senses, you're building the temple, you know. Um, and I did a segment before about the temple of the Most High, you know. And sometimes it's difficult to imagine that when we read about, in certain books and whatnot, the process and the materials that go into building a temple or even an ark, or something that will house the spirit of the Most High. Peace, Mimi. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that what's really being represented is the body of man and woman, and all of the different designs and process that go into that man or woman manifesting that high deity of the Most High. So like even when you're connecting with the symbol vibration, that symbol that you saw all the way at the top, that's the capstone, or that's like the Merkaba, peace, me, myself, and I, and Ruhia as well. So it's important to understand, like, peace, Ricochet, like how YG Gutter just said, man, that was low vibrational. Like, that's a part of your building, though. That's still emanating and vibrating off of your building. You know, and I mean, and we all have our things. Sometimes it's a process of constantly going through and scrubbing, and oh man, I forgot about this. Sometimes it's things inside of your physical house. Like you might have had some sticky traps that you put under your dresser or under your bed, and you forgot about them. Peace, Juanisha. They're somewhere, under a piano or something that you don't pull out often, and you just forgot it. And you pull out, and then you find two, three mice on top of a sticky trap, or a bunch of, insects, or a baby snake or something like that. And that thing's been inside of your temple, inside of your space. Peace, Alex. Peace. That thing's Alex Legant. I always say your first and last. My bad. And congratulations again, Alex. you know, um, Alex had a baby girl. But yeah, man. Sometimes you don't realize, even within your space, there are things that are rotting and putrefying, putrefying. Excuse me. It's early, my tongue is heavy. Peace, Ali Isha Howard. So, yeah, man, like you said, YG Gutter, man, that was a part of, you know, a time when you were vibrating a certain way, man. You still vibrate. It's still there as long as it's still present. And sometimes, like I said, even in our physical house, we have things that are just like, this needs to go. I'm not going to use this anymore, or it's broken, or it's filthy, or whatever, the that thing may be, or that thing may be out of alignment. But like I said, man, peace, peace, Eddie Moon, greetings. That macabre, or that stone that's on top, that's your symbol. That's your symbol, and that's what's kind of channeling or focusing. If you think about like a laser focus, that highest symbol is where all of your power and your energy is being focused through. So through this process, even you are building the temple of the Most High. And it's not just about working out, and things like that, and getting movement in, and eating a certain way. That's a part of it, but building the temple is also looking at all the things that go into making you what you are, you know, um, beyond your creation. What is making you. And like I had mentioned recently, never confuse what you do with who you are. Don't confuse the what with the who, because there'll come a time when you can't do the what. And you never want your identity wrapped up in the what, because the who is dynamic, and the what is always temporary. You want the what to be temporary willfully. Somebody says what you are today, you don't want you to be that same thing on your deathbed. you know um so yeah, just a little side note, in terms of that. you know and that was all just kind of a precursor, just because like I told YG Gutter, for those of you just came in, that I had listened to his music, and then he had said that that was low vibrational stuff. So that's what I'm just talking about. Sometimes we might have low vibrational things that are still out there. Peace, Christina. We may have low vibrational things that are out there, and we look at them like they're in our past, but you know, in the other space, there's no concept of time, so it's still happening. I'll give you an example. There's a piece, Deidre, Sister Deidre. Well, there's more than one song. I got a lot of music out, like between the internet and SoundCloud and other places that I did when I was, I started producing music when I was a teenager, like professionally. So there's a pretty long history of stuff that I've done, and it wasn't all righteous music per se. And it's out, it's done. Work for hire situations. Selling what we call track selling music. But there's also actually a couple of videos I've been in, and I could say maybe the most basal or animalistic one was one with my own crew, one with my own group. Peace, Marjorie. And I've seen it on a couple of YouTube channels, like uh, classic '90s hip hop. So I'm classic now. It's all good, But peace, Rosalind. But I've seen the video and I'm actually in it, and it's interesting because I'm actually in a couple of videos. One with my group, and then a couple with another duo that was out back in the days, from my town. And you know they were a part of our crew, so we were in all of their videos. And I've had students spot me. I've been spotted twice. you know, um, but so something I don't necessarily have control of. I'm not gonna like go to the person trying to take that down because now I'm Chief Yuya and I don't. It is what it is. Um, so some things, you may not. They tell you chronicle too. You know what I mean? Sometimes. So you have to kind of know what. James God would love to check it out. I don't know if you would. Yeah, I don't know if you would. It's not probably what y'all probably thinking. It was like some positive hip hop. It wasn't that. You know. Yeah. So so yeah, some of it shows your chronicle. And I'm not ashamed of my chronicle. Just so you say, I'm not saying that. Just so you know, I'm not saying that. And I'm just giving you another perspective as well. Why you gotta like, it tells your story. It tells your story, and but you have to be able to own and claim your story. You have to be able to say, well, yeah, this is where I was at that time, and or maybe that's a part of me, and then this is where I transitioned to, and things like that, or maybe these are some of my friends that I came up with, and that's a part of my story too. I think one of the most powerful things I've seen via hip hop, you know, one time was when Lupe Fiasco had shared. He had done that video. Remember, I don't know if some of you remember when he kind of first came out and he did those interviews around Chicago, and he was just showing like his old neighborhood and the house he grew up in, and then he was talking to a bunch of guys on the street. There were maybe like five of them, and he was like, "Yeah, we all grew up together. This, that, and the third." And then I think it was like a year or two later, they did another interview with him, but they flashed back the old one, and they're saying, "Yeah, you remember what we did and that?" And he started crying in the interview, and they were like, "What's going on?" He was like, "I'm just, everybody in that you see right there is dead now. Every single person that is on camera or is on the screen right now is dead," and he's sitting there crying. So he didn't come up in the streets like that, but when you're in the neighborhood, everybody doesn't have to be a tough guy to know the tough guys. And I thought that was an amazing moment to kind of show the journey of a people. to give some testimony and some evidence to that. So, like I said, man, sometimes your art will serve as that too. It will show your journey. Like I said, I got stuff that I'm in. Um, I'm in a documentary. You can't really see me though because I'm riding a motorcycle. I'm doing a wheelie. I got the bike in the air, and yeah, I'm about three documentaries. I'm in a couple of documentaries, a couple of music videos, and then I have a lot of music that's just out. So that is what it is, brother. It's your journey, man. It's your journey. But if you have control over that music and you're saying it's low vibration, I ain't gonna tell you, Nikki. I ain't gonna tell you. But if you have I'm actually riding motorcycle more. I'm also in a music video riding a quad as well. I'm riding a quad and I got another one, but that was a documentary where I'm actually you see me with the bike up in the air. But yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, man. So it's just a journey, man. It's just your journey. But if you feel that what you've gotten there is still putting out a certain energy, thanks for the clues. Yeah, I shouldn't even say because no, you Kashia, you. Oh my goodness, you like the doggone Oracle in the Matrix. You just be finding stuff. But yeah, a couple of the videos I actually have on this channel, but I have them as unlisted. I didn't make them public, you know. But it's just it's too much swearing and cussing, too much swearing and cussing for the grandmas, So I didn't want to put that up there. But yeah. So one of the things I wanted to just touch on for a second, man. As we going through it all, right? As we're touching so many different things. We had spoken about choices recently, and of course, for anyone who's new, we've been just going over some information where we can kind of take control of our lives, and what I've been finding has been happening, from what I'm seeing with people, what people are sharing is that there's been a kind of a shift in taking over things just as a result of listening to these segments and being present, right? So sometimes it's not like what am I applying right now. Sometimes it's not what I have the ability or even the willingness to apply right now. But sometimes it's just being in the presence of certain conversations or certain people and certain energy that will start shifting things and your experience. They'll start shifting things in your life and in your experience. Let me turn my music down. I'm sorry. Yeah. Um, so I've been seeing like testimony after testimony of a lot of change. And this is also a season where, and no disrespect to anybody, please. You might take it that way, but please don't. But, when the weather gets cooler, a lot of times field mice and things like that try to come inside to try to get warm. Like when the winter seasons are coming. And I've noticed like a lot of people are also like trying to come back around. We've been getting a lot of like emails and messages like so and so wants to know about how they can sign up for the our new ministry again, and so and so wants to this that. Like my assistants are sending me all these different messages, and I'm like, this person left, this person stormed off, that person just stopped, participating, but winter's coming. I know it almost sounds like Game of Thrones, right? But winter's coming and people want a warm place to nestle inside to, and don't worry, I know you're listening right now, one of you, and you think I'm gonna like tell your business. I'm not. But this dawning even, what time did you send those to me? And I know you're listening. But it was about 4 a.m. I think you sent them. Sent me a couple of mug shots and a story about how somebody beat you up, your boyfriend beat you up, along with the mug shots and everything like that. And Don't worry, I'm not going. I know you like he better not say my name. I'm not going to say your name. But Peace Pad Mini 144, and you said that the choices segment that I did recently brought you to a place of a crossroads where you could make certain choices. This goes to something I said before, because I'm not going to text you back. I'm just going to address it here. I gave you all the help that I'm going to give you. All right. So at this point, you need to apply what I've already given you. I've been advising you for years now, and you have. I'm gonna have to say it to you, sis. You have selfishly and arrogantly wanted to do whatever you felt like doing, and then whenever you get in trouble, you think that it's gonna invoke some sort of sympathy on my part. But I don't have any sympathy for you. It was inevitable that somebody was gonna beat your ass. That was inevitable. So I'm sorry. Peace. Give thanks, channel OYT. I don't. That might be you. I don't know. I don't know if you're using a different screen name. But only thing I could tell you is to apply the wisdom that I've given you already, and it's been a lot of it. It's been a lot of it. We done sat face to face, and I then gave you guidance. Peace and dream. But give thanks, channel OY0 YT. I'm sorry, not OYT. Zero, channel zero. Give thanks. But I've given you face to face. I've given you wisdom on the phone. I've given you readings. I mean, you chose not to apply. You apply whatever you feel like applying, and then you get offended by the rest. So, like I've said before to other people and to you, the same level of help is not going to be available to you throughout your life because I have better things to do. So you got to apply what's already been put in front of you. So that's just an example. Now that was, I think the first one came in at 4:15 or 4:10 a.m. somewhere around there. Now I'm up, and of course this person, you probably know I'm always up. I don't really sleep. So um, that's all I got for you. That's all I got for you because we're moving, and the doors are closing, and that door that was wide open maybe a year ago, months ago, where you could come to the door and knock and get some advice and then walk away. There's nobody at the booth anymore. There's nobody at the booth, and the gate is closing. We're getting ready to sail off. So don't think that you could just keep, and that's for everybody. You could just keep playing around for your entire existence. You lucky he didn't kill you. I saw the images with the lip and you lifting up your lip and showing. Yeah, I looked at it. I saw the pictures. I ain't got no sympathy for you. You know, and there's been a couple of people who reached out, and this is going on. My life is falling apart. My this and that, and it seems to be all people who were around before. you know, um, that sense of entitlement has to stop, and that's not just. I'm saying with all of us, where we feel like we're entitled to all this time, like everything's gonna wait for us, and we don't understand that the cosmos will just let another generation pass. Like, okay, I'll do it with the next generation. Y'all don't want to do it, I'll do it with the next one. No big deal. We are chosen, and that means a lot, man. But sometimes we're looking for social appointment. We're looking for man's appointment, and that's what messes us up. That's why I say, like, you cannot confuse what you do with who you are. That's one of the biggest mistakes. There's something that used to happen back in the days. A lot of you may remember this, and for some of you, it was very traumatic and horrible, and for some of you, it was no big deal. But you remember when we were children and we played recess? At school we got recess and we got to play different sports, whether it's kickball, dodgeball, two-hand tag, or whatever. You know, and they would do this thing, or sometimes it was in gym class, right? We playing basketball or whatever, or softball, and they would do this thing where they would have two team captains, and then the team captains would pick who they want on their team. And no matter what happens, it's always gonna be peace, Pad Mini. Give thanks. I appreciate the super chat. You know, Thank you for being me. All right, I'm gonna keep on doing it. Then you're welcome. I'm gonna keep on being me. That ain't that hard. That's easy because ain't nobody else doing it. I can be me better than I could be anybody else. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, when you would go through that experience, there's always like one or two children that are left, or three, and then the captains are like, all right, we'll take so and so, or we'll take the, all right, come on, just come over here, or oh, we got to get so and so, you know, and children can be extremely mean, and even if you're like the fifth person pick, it might still feel like, that's you. We best friends. You didn't even pick me first. You might have that kind of experience, and it's always that trauma that a lot of times children go through. And it's a quiet trauma because children are pretty mean. Tanika says I was always like, oh, yeah. You should have went and played something else. You should have came with a note. And tell the gym teacher I can't play today. I can't. But sometimes that could be um, very traumatizing. You know, and the reality is we tend to carry those experiences forward in life. And you laugh at you right. You right. You right. Information. I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry. All right. Metaphysics. Let me say something serious. Metaphysics. But yeah, we go through those experiences. And I was never picked last. I'm just sorry, but I can sympathize. But I did used to sympathize with those who were picked last. Yeah, it was horrible. I feel you. I'm sure it was. Peace, La Cruz. Your children are honest sometimes, but they are mean. Peace, India. Peace, Esme. They can be very mean too. A lot of the trauma that people carry into adulthood is over chunky kids never get picked first in my scenario. Well, I guess it depends on if you was athletic too. I don't think I wasn't a chunky kid, but I don't know. I never had a problem with getting picked early. I was athletic enough that I could get through. I was into athleticism, you know. But some stuff I was better at than others, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But like I think it's bad either way because a lot of times everybody's got their stories now. Like, yeah, back in third grade, we was playing t-ball. Everybody's over. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up all this stuff for y'all. You know what I mean? I didn't mean to bring it all up to the surface like this. You know, I'm sorry. I apologize. you know, and it's just a nervous laugh. It's not a but we carry a lot of that into adulthood. Oh, cause she always brought books outside. Wow, you were, that's who you were. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you know, um, yeah. And I think you work in education now. You're a teacher's assistant. So you went from the childhood, and I think you had a podcast, The Black Librarian. So you were the child who brought books to recess. Then you became a librarian, and then a teacher. Oh, okay, all right. That's okay. Cool. Well, we need those too to make society. You still have the podcast. Okay, peace, Shakira. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you got those, and then you have jocks. Yeah, grow. You right. So you need different people to make the world go. Somebody got to know how to work the computers. You were clearly that young lady, you know. But I used to bring books to recess too, so don't feel bad. I used to bring book because we had this thing in my elementary. If you didn't do your homework, you had to sit on the wall. We called it, well, it was a wall. Which was the wall of the school. And peace Omega, greetings. And you had to sit there and do your work and finish whatever homework you didn't do while the other, while you got to watch your friends play. So technically, me and you did the same thing because I never, ever, ever did homework. I never. So it was so interesting. I think it was my teacher's name was Miss Toronto. I think it was fifth grade. Fifth grade, I only got to do recess. I think about 3, 4 times for the whole school year. Peace, Aquia. I think it was about 3, 4 times. Because I remember when I got off the wall, Peace, Quindy, like there was a whole big roar. And I remember I got to go play dodgeball, and everybody was like, "Oh, yeah, we want him, we want him, we want him." And then the next day, I was I was back on the wall again, probably for about the rest of the year. Yeah, I didn't do homework at all. You know what I mean? And I held the wall down. I held that block down. You know what I mean? I controlled the wall because some of the children, children would do their homework sometimes, but then would do it. So they would kind of come on in and off the wall. You know what I mean? But I was always on the wall. Winter, spring, and snow. Winter, spring, fall. I'm on the wall. You know what I mean? So when they would come through, I would show them how it would go. You know what I mean? Like I'll kind of acclimate them to wall life. Yeah, like what I mean. You gotta sit here and ask the teacher for a clipboard, whatever, so you could do your homework on your clipboard. Because you do it on your book, you're gonna get the lines all over your book. You know what I mean? And you should wrap your book up with brown paper. You know what I mean? Brown paper bag, so that way you don't get ink on the book. Because if you get ink on the cover when you go to turn it at the end of the year, they're gonna send a note home to your parents, so you have to buy the book. Stuff like I had it down to. I'm telling you, I'm not lying. I was on the wall every day. I was jailing on the wall. Now I was in jail, but I was on that wall. You know what I mean? I was doing hard time on the wall. You know what I mean? And they let me go on a work release. They let me go on a furlough like 3, 4 times, and I violated the furlough, and they put me back on the wall. You know what I mean? So yeah, like fifth grade, I only got to do recess like 3 times, 3, 4 times, whatever. I was on the wall. Yeah, Pink Floyd. So I'm right there with you, Kashi. I went outside every day, and I would try to keep walking. And this Toronto would be like, you, you over there. Where you going? Where you going? Over there. Whatever. I try to skate, you know, try to hide in the crowd and run out with everybody else. So yeah, don't feel any way about that. You know what I mean? We all got our experiences, but with all that aside, and some of you may also have. I don't know. I wasn't the only one who held the wall down at my school. You know what I mean? But I do remember that day. I tell you something crazy. I got my first kiss on the wall. Me and that wall had some experiences, man. They had this girls club that they started or something. These the little girls in the school, and they had this thing where they dared each other to kiss the boy they like. So I remember this day. I was on the wall, and there was 3 girls that liked me, and whoever kissed me first, it was some stupidness. They got into some little club or whatever like that, and this girl sat next to me and told the teacher like, "Oh, I'm gonna help him with his work," and then she kissed me. And then the other one, Linda. I remember their names and everything. This is bad. But yeah, so I got action on the wall. You know what I mean? I was getting action on the wall. I was friends would throw me Jolly Ranchers, throw me a little candy or whatever. Sometimes the ball would like bounce over, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm getting it to throw it back," you know. So you get your little things in there as you can go. But I didn't mind. You know what I'm saying? All for the kiss? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, a kiss turned into something more than that. But that's a whole other story. But but yeah, man. Yeah, we were granted visits exactly because she always did her work. So it was like she was one of the good. Well, they thought she was good. That little girl was fresh. That little girl was fresh. But anyway, so like I said, a lot of us we go through those rejection periods, and it starts from very young, and it creates a fear. right? And it creates a fear of rejection as we get older. You know, I ate slow and missed a lot of recess. Oh, I never seen that one. I guess you was in the cafeteria, ate slow, and so what? The lunch ladies would just watch you during that. Why don't you just throw the food out or whatever, or like wrap it up? Recess is like, I don't know. I guess maybe I cherished recess because I know, I didn't really get to participate that much. I thought recess was everything, you know. I got chased around the playground and eventually home by a wall boy trying to kiss me. A wall boy. Apple scrapple. Okay, you know. That's what we used to call wall boys, huh? Okay, well, whatever. you know, but you got to remember too. I skipped grades, so I was bored. I wasn't not. I wasn't doing homework not because it was difficult or whatever. I was younger than everybody in all my class. Just I was a big child, so no one knew how young I actually was. But I was bored out of my mind. And then the lies they would tell in class, and I had, you know, I was really far beyond what was being taught, at that time, and that was a public school because I came from private school to public school, and it was a Moorish owned private school. The matter of fact, the first one in New York State. You could look it up. The very first Moorish owned school in New York State. That's where I went. That's where I started school at, rather. And then later we moved. And then when we moved, I was, in a different kind of environment, and that was public school. And I was like, this is the pits. like this sucks. Class parties was even different. Like I remember having a class party in the old school, the Moorish school, and like I'm not a spring chicken, but they would bring. I remember my teacher used to bring the 45s and blow them off, and like there'd be music, and she'd be dancing, like, cause it'd be real music, like music we listen to, like Earth, Wind and Fire and stuff like that, like real music. You know what I mean? And then I remember the transition, like the other school class party just meant sitting there eating some cheese doodles. You know what I'm saying? There's no music, there's no dancing. I'm like, what the hell is this? Oh, this is how y'all party. Okay, all right, I got you. so it was a lot of. I was bored. I was just bored. So I was like, man, I'm not gonna be bored all day, and then go home and do this boring ass homework. I'm not. I'll just do it on the wall tomorrow. you know, and still graduated early. Still graduated high school early. Still was in all honors classes. Got awards and all of that, and went through high school. Didn't do any homework. went to high school. Didn't do any homework. And still. What was my GPA? 3.93. I think something like that. 3.9. It was 3.9 something. No homework. Now, I don't know if I'm encouraging young people not to do homework. I don't mean to, but if you do what works for you, man. But yeah, I wasn't into the homework thing or the books thing. I didn't carry no books home either. You know, you was a serial skipper. See, that's the thing. I didn't skip classes. That's the thing. I didn't do homework, but my attendance was always 100. I did not skip any classes. I didn't miss any midterms. I didn't miss any finals. No tests. No quizzes. I aced all my quiz. I didn't none, but no homework. so that was my deal. Listen. I'll get straight A's. I'll give you your A's. I'll make you look good. In front of the school board. I'm gonna bring that curve up, but no homework. Not doing the homework. So that was an unspoken agreement I kind of made with all my teachers. I ain't doing no homework. You know what I mean? When I get home, I got other things I want to do. I want to practice music. You know what I'm saying? I got records to listen to, and then what I mean, like there's fun outside. I got a bicycle. I got a skateboard. I'm not. You ain't taking that from me. So anyway, let's go back to it. So we're talking about fears, right? And a lot of times that's where the fears generate. It's the trauma. Like that was some of the fears that generated for me coming from such a loving environment, being in a Moorish school like that. And when I say Moorish, I want you to understand I'm saying black, African, African American, Hebrew, Negro. All right. So just make. I know for some of you use different type of terminology for melanin dominant or melanin rich people. So I use certain phrases interchangeably. Right. So it wasn't a Moorish school in the sense that it was under the auspices of the teachings of Noble Drew Ali. It wasn't a part of the Moorish Science Temples of America. I'm saying Moorish in that the people who owned it and ran it, and the curriculum was based. It was for black people, right? It was for black people, black children. You know, um, so so anyway, that's where a lot of our fears first generate. They a lot of them they initiate in our childhood, and then as we grow older, like I said, a lot of times we wrap up our identity in what it is that we do. So like Naya just said wall boys. Like that's an identity that I didn't feel like I had. I just felt like I'm smarter than all. That was the identity that I owned. Like, haha, y'all laughing on because I'm on the wall, but you don't know I'm like 2 or 3 years younger than all of y'all. Haha. Like I'm getting out of school super early. I'll be like 16 years old when I graduate high school. 16, 15 years old. Ha ha. Jokes on you. But that was the narrative that was in my head. And I'm not saying that I was doing the best thing, in that sense, but that was just the narrative that was in my as a I'm a child, what I mean, at that time. Um but like I said, you know, um a lot of times we have these fears that keep us from making certain choices, and a lot of times it's fears of rejection, and it's fears of not being chosen because we don't realize that we were already chosen. Like, okay, you want to play softball, you want to play dodgeball, you want to play whatever, and you get chosen last, and like, yeah, it's traumatizing, but you don't already have established in your mind, I was already chosen by the creator. I'm here, I'm learning, and I'm given the opportunity to build my temple every single day. So that means I'm already chosen. So if you choose me for your basketball game or for your volleyball game, or whatever, badminton or whatever it is that you're playing, and whether you choose me or not doesn't matter because I've already been chosen. And some of us, we don't have that. So it's just like when I went into those environments and I'm now sitting on the wall, and the teachers are baffled because they heard all of these amazing things about me when I first came to the school, and he writes poetry and he this and that and that, and I'm not doing homework, and you don't know how to validate me in any other way other than me doing your homework. You don't understand. I've already established an identity for myself already. I don't care about your accolades, and I remember at times getting report cards, and having my parent or parents say, wow, look at this, man, this, that, but they say, you don't do your, it was always a comment on every report, no homework, doesn't do homework, right? And and he was like, Mrs. So and so is so disappointed because they say, you have so much potential, but you won't do. Little do you know, I don't care about Mrs. So and so. I could care less. So that doesn't mean anything to me what you're saying, because I've already had a divine spiritual experience. You see, I've already been validated by the energy and the spirits that I hold high. I've already had interactions with ancestors. I've already had interactions. When I went to another kind of school, I had matriarchal figures who looked like me, who when I would come into class would pinch my cheek, oh, he's so handsome, and there was a motherly kind of warmth there while there was instruction. So that validated me first. So I don't care about this individual. You know, um, I may have shared this once, but I remember, I went to an all Euro school because I lived in an all Euro place at one point in my life. When my family we moved on up, moving on up, we moved on up and moved on out, and it was just really me there. And I had a teacher who came and pat my head my first day of class. She was like, "Can I touch your hair?" And she was like, "Oh my god." She's like, "I've never felt anything like that. It feels so spongy. It's like a sponge." This is how dumb these people were, you know. And I'm a little child, so I don't know to say like, "No, you can't touch my hair, you ignorant." You know what I mean? I didn't know to say that, so I'm just like, okay. Imagine walking by that. Any of you sisters, you walk by a classroom and you look inside and you see a little brown boy sitting there in a room of all non brown children, and there's a non brown woman sitting there. Oh my God, that's touching, patting his head and feeling his hair. How would you react? You know, I didn't even know to go home and tell my mother because at the time I didn't even know how wrong that was as a child. Like as an adult, and I'm like, what the, you know? Because at that time she had never actually, literally, she had never seen a non-white person. I was the first non-white person she had ever been in contact with. You know, we going back. You know, I mean, this is before we were all over TV, and you know, and we were popular. You know, so when you come from another, now that could have been traumatizing if I didn't already have a thorough, you know, knowledge of self by that young age. You know, I started very young on my journey. So my knowledge of self, I knew my hair was better than hers. I knew that. You know, and I knew that I was already chosen by the Most High. I knew that I was chosen by the Creator because I remember saying to her one day, she was blonde and she had a short haircut and she was blonde. I remember saying, you know, your hair looks like a dandelion's hair. She was like, oh, thank. And I was like, yeah, it looks like if you just blow on it, the wind will just blow it off of your head. I'm a little child saying this, but this is how I really felt. Like I'm like, it doesn't look. It looks like it'll just blow off. It looks weak. You know. And meanwhile, she's like, "Yeah, it's like a sponge. Oh my God, it's so crazy." So while we're being honest, Miss Grober, that was her name. I don't know. I don't know her first name. Her name was Miss Grober. While we're being honest, Miss Grober, you know. But and she happened to be a nice lady too. On top of all of that, you know, just ignorant and inappropriate. You know, and it was a different time. You know what I'm saying? But that first sense of validation when it comes from a spiritual space, it allows you the courage to make the choices that you're supposed to make because you're very clear on where you stand and who you are, and that's where a lot of times the difficulty in balancing out our sense of courage or our sense of being able to um, make certain choices. It becomes very difficult because, like I said, we're still functioning from a space of fear. I'm afraid I'll get rejected. I'm afraid that this won't work. Or I'm afraid it won't happen in the time that I want it to happen. So therefore, I'm going to push the clock. I'm going to make it, you know, when I want it to make it. And not understanding that, you know, when you come into awareness, it doesn't mean that you're going to get everything that you want, but you will get what you need. That will happen. Your needs will be met. You may not get everything that you want. That you know, that's not guaranteed. You know, but needs will be met so that you can continue on to do your work. You know, so that you can continue on to function and be who and what, you know, you're supposed to be. You know, and like I said, that sense of validation because who chose me? You know, oh man, they didn't, like Tanika said, it was horrible. You didn't choose me for this. You didn't choose me for that, or you know, and whoever else has gone through that experience. Maybe I didn't have too much of the experience because I didn't get that much recess. I don't know. You know, so my friends was just happy to see me off the wall. You know, um, but because it carried on through grades, by the way, in this particular school. So I was on the wall. I was on the wall for a couple of years. I did a couple of years on the wall, you know. But I didn't care. It was recess, 45 minutes. So I trade in. This is my thinking. If I go home and do my homework, I'm locked in the room at least for an hour. You know what I mean? It might not take that long, but by the time I sit down and by the time I finish making my saltine crackers with the peanut butter, what I mean, and all the after school snacks you make. By the time I sit down with a nice glass of Tang and some peanut butter, Tang and peanut butter, and sit down and do the homework, like blew a whole hour out of my playtime, and the sun is setting. I got the street lights coming on, so I got to get back in soon. You know what I mean? So I could go outside and play for 2 3 hours, or I can, and sacrifice 43 minutes during the day of supervised play. You know what I mean? Like if you put it just it didn't really add up to me. Now you can keep the supervised play. I'm gonna play outside for 2 3 hours and just do the wall again tomorrow. So that was how my little kitty mathematics were working at that time. Peace, Ia Aldere. You know, Andrine says it's funny how we don't reciprocate the same ignorance. It's not in us. You know, but sometimes we also have to be able to look at things from an objective point of view. Like I said, she was a nice lady, as far as what I remember. So I'm not gonna say, oh, because she did that she was racist. She didn't know what she was doing. You know what I'm saying? She had no clue that was inappropriate. We've also come to a space now where the voice of the Negro is more widely spread. Yes, we had books and we had movies and documentaries back then, but no one felt compelled to watch them. Unless it was someone who was learning that type of information. But you weren't compelled to watch them if you were non-black, or to read them or to understand them. So now we live in a day and time where there's a bit more sensitivity to things like that, and I think that there's less fascination. I think that's a part of it too. um just dumb. Because whether the child is Negro or not, you don't touch a child. You don't violate a child's space like that, or say, "Can I touch you?" Like, what is a child going to say? In most instances, this is how children get abused. You know, um, so I'd have to go back. As a child, I don't remember certain things, but I guess I'd have to go back and like really see and look at her again now as an adult and see, like, okay, was this individual, a racist or whatever? I don't think so. But again, I don't remember. I was, I was a child. Maybe she was. Doesn't matter. I'm still gonna do what I need to do. As far as reciprocating ignorance, the answer for ignorance is not ignorance. That's not how we respond to ignorance. We respond to ignorance with wisdom. You know, um, so I'm wise now to experiences like that. And when I had children, I was able to teach them, because my children also had hair that made people say, "Oh," because my children were locked up and had free form locks, and it made people, when they were very young, like, "Oh, that's," or what's underneath there, and stuff like that. So you know it starts again. And it wasn't necessarily non-negro people, peace, Mama Marva, who were trying to impose in that way. So I had to teach him from a young age, like, no, this is your body, this is your womb. If you don't even want me to touch your hair, you could say, no, Baba, I don't want you. Okay, it's your body. So those experiences and things like that, they help to prepare us sometimes for the work that's ahead of us. And that's just what it is, man. That's just what it is. We got to start seeing more the world from a more chess point of view. These are chess moves that are being made. And sometimes when you bring a certain thing into an environment, it's hard to imagine that the environment is not prepared to handle it. You bring a sovereign, self-aware Negroid child into a Eurocentric utopic environment. It was utopia for them because there was none of us there. So you bring a child like that into an environment, the environment has not been prepared to sustain that. It doesn't know how to address maybe even some of the comments I may have, or the questions that I may have. The environment hasn't been prepared for that yet. So it's the same thing for some of us moving through the world as sovereigns. It becomes very difficult because we live in a social structure that has not been prepared for us. They haven't been prepared for you to make free choices. You know, it's just like when you go to court, a lot of times you're facing lawyers that have never gone to trial. You know, they've been sending people away for the past 5, 6 years, sending them away, giving them football numbers, but never, they don't know how to go to trial. They only know they only know plea deals, right? So now when somebody comes in there and they have a free mind, they say, no, no, let's fight. Let's go through the halls of Ma'at. Let's go through the Ma'atic process. It's like they'll do everything in their power to try to talk you out of it. You know, try to scare you out of it. All different sorts of things. They'll delay things, whatever. They don't want you to go to that. They're not prepared to handle that type of energy or that type of presence. You know, in that particular space. So a lot of times, even when we're fretting over, you know, our fears of rejections or our fears of not being chosen, we're looking at that, you know, from a perspective of the people who would choose us, the people who would reject us, do not even understand exactly, or they're not even prepared to even know how to choose somebody like us. Like I said, me going into that type of environment, the teacher didn't even know to say, like, you know what, he doesn't really need to do the homework because he's over here teaching us stuff. Like, you know, this things that he knows that I don't even know. Like, you know, so maybe we need to establish something else. You know, maybe we need to have a different kind of conversation. You know, and sometimes, like I said, people are just not, they're just not ready for that. They just don't know what that's supposed to look like. You know, so that's what I'm saying. A lot of times those fears that we have, they're so unreal. You know, they're so unreal because, you know, we're afraid to leap out on our with our gifts. We're afraid to expose our talents. We're afraid to expose our authentic self. And like I said earlier on another segment, we don't have the courage to be different. We're afraid to really have the courage to be different because we're afraid that we're going to be rejected. You know, without understanding, like Tanika said, you know, and I'm sure that at least she was courageous enough to mention. I'm sure there's more of y'all, but like she said, you know, I was picked last every time. You know, well, you pick last now. You know, when's the last somebody asked you to last time somebody asked you to play dodgeball or kickball or you know whatever all the little you know buck you might have came up in the time of buck you know what I mean, or hot peas and butter. You know, when's the last time somebody asked you to play jacks or something like that and pick you know. So when you tie up who you are into what you do or what you have the ability to do, it creates that ongoing fear of exhuming yourself into the world or unfurling or unraveling or exposing, you know, truly what you are to the world because you're still wrapped up in those fears of rejection. You're still wrapped up in those fears of what if I'm not chosen, which is directly aligned with having a fear of rejection, you know, without really understanding that you've already been chosen. Look how far you've made it. You've already been chosen. You know, like a lot of times we even give that example when we want to encourage people. You know, we say like, "You're special because out of a million sperm cells, you made it to the egg. You were able to penetrate that egg." But scientifically, there's other sperm cells that can get to the egg, but the egg will accept and or reject the ones that it wants. And there's even scientific evidence that the I know about Buck from Bill Cosby. You remember on the Cosby Show? They used to play Buck. Mudfoot, like, why don't y'all go play Buck? And they climb up on that pole, see who get the highest. Yeah, y'all don't know about that. But yeah, man, Buck, that's a real game, you know. But or manhunt. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. You know, hide and go freak. But nah. But anyway, so don't play that. So you have this fear, you know, that's again generated based on people not really understanding you, or people not really kind of knowing what it is that you're bringing, and then you stay coiled, you stay chambered up, you know, as a result, you know. So yeah, you know, I just really wanted to speak on that. Like, who's the chosen? The chosen ones are the ones who are building the temple. Period. You know, find and grind. Look at you, y'all going off on that one. Mm-hmm. Nasty self. Spiritual people are the most nastiest anyway. Y'all so damn free. That's where that comes from. That's all that freeness. Fine and grind, you know. But so yeah, exactly. I never heard of it either because she, that's she. I ain't gonna say where she from. I told you I'm gonna start keeping people's locations private. Plus she's from a different era too. You know, hide and go get it. Yeah, that was another one. Look, yeah, you see, out of everything I talked about, this is what y'all want to talk about. Y'all old selves. Nobody want to play with y'all old behinds no more, man. Who the heck want to play hide and go freak with y'all? Most of y'all common, y'all old as hell, man. Y'all can't even crouch down in no bushes to be even found, man. You freaking knees, you making all that noise, giving your location away. Shh. Then you can't even crouch because you got a bad back of bad knees, so you just be laying down. Shh. Stop making noise. You making noise. I ain't making no noise. Your voice is all old now, so you can't even whisper no more. Ain't nobody trying to get with you. Go sit your old behinds down somewhere, man. Nasty selves. Anyway, like I was saying, um, yeah, man. Like I was saying, that fear, man, is a mother. I didn't even say it like that. Fear is a mother. But let me tell you something, Pimpin. When it comes to fear, you got to grab it. You got to hold on to it. Cause fear is a mother. You see, you got to hold on. You got to talk to fear. You got to talk to fear face to face. You understand what I'm saying, Pimpin? Pimpin, Pimpin, Pimpin. That's what I say. And whenever fear comes to me, I use the power word. The power word is what? Pimpin. Nah, don't do that. Nah, don't do it like that. But I know you're like, why he play so damn much? Why don't he just teach us the deep messages? I am. but, but yeah, man. So afraid to exhume, afraid to come out of your shell, afraid to give birth to your talent, baby. You see, afraid to do any of that because you're afraid that you haven't been chosen. But if you saw that symbol at the top of your head, or you were even able to travel to the top of your head, that means you are a temple builder. That's what that means. You're a temple builder. And like I said, we're commonly told that like, oh, you special because you peace, Anaba, free you're told that, you're special because you fertilize the egg. We don't understand that no, the egg also expands and reaches out to the sperm that it wants. There's always this theory that the egg is just sitting there and the sperm cells are like swimming, and the first one to get there, I got the egg. It doesn't. The egg could be surrounded by sperm cells. Peace, Josephine Moresby, and it could be surrounded by sperm cells. And it wants what it wants. It wants, and you think about that when you think about the feminine nature. It chooses. It makes a choice. You see, it's not just sitting there, helpless and whoever gonna come knock me up, guess it's gonna fertilize me and I'll be, Kushia. I'll be Fase. I'll be Mama Marva. I'll be YG Gutter. Spitting raps, talking about cracks in the raps. No, it's not doing that. It's actually actively, peace, hope, greetings, salute to you too. It's actually, it's active. It's an active part on both parts. Or active process, excuse me, on both parts. Y'all talking about the likes versus the views, huh? You know, hey, you know how they are, man. They don't like me. I guess that's the bottom line. They don't like me. Maybe they're not feeling me. That's all right. You know what? You know why I don't really press for likes like that? I mean, you should click the like button because it does help the channel a lot and it helps the views. And my channel has been stuck. I can't get any new subscribers for some weird reason. I don't know. I get new people on these videos every single day, but the subscriber count doesn't go up. I'm still also blocked on IG for some reason no one can tell me. I don't know. So I don't know what's going on. Yeah, but they love the food. You're right. But they don't like me. But you know why I don't stress it too? Because sometimes I watch bushcraft. Some of you may be familiar with bushcraft, right? Where sometimes they got those videos with the two brothers and they be like, they be building like an underground pool, a grotto, what I mean, with a barbecue pit in the middle of the woods with like just a stone, in a sarsaparilla leaf, you know, and they don't talk through the whole thing. Now, some of that stuff is staged. It's staged because it's like, yeah, we're gonna build the steps, and we just all he has is a piece of flint, and stuff like that. But there's no sound, there's no talking, there's no asking for likes, there's no asking for subscribers, there's none of that. It's just the quality and oh, thank you, Tanika D. You know what I mean? You chose me. You got to turn time to reciprocate. You chose me, gave me an offering. But you look at those particular and I'm thanking her for the super chat, by the way. You look at those type of videos and you start to realize, oh, your son likes those videos. Yeah, they're cool. They're cool to watch. Um, they're not asking for likes and subscribes. It's just that the content is so fascinating that you want to click like or you want to click subscribe. So sometimes I think about it like that too. And it's like, well, um, maybe they really don't like it. Because you look at those videos, it's like millions of views and millions of likes and stuff like that. You know, um, yeah, we know they use equipment off camera. Yeah, I mean, but it's still cool to look at and to imagine. You know what I mean? Even when you look at uh, peace, sovereignties, shadow likes. Yeah, they liking you from the shadows. Yeah, or hating, but um, even if you look at some of the survival, like Bear Grylls, him, um, um, Alone and Naked in the Woods, even like Survivor, that show. A lot of that stuff is staged. Is staged, man. They give him food and all kind of stuff, man. It's not. Bear Grylls is. It's like sometimes you'll see like ladders and stuff, and it's like I thought you was in the middle of the desert with nothing but a buck knife and some mulberries. Where'd the ladder come from? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's staged, but again, it's cool to watch. But and sometimes it gives you ideas. At the same time, but so that's why sometimes I look at it. Peace, Tareen. And I say, man, well, if it's as fascinating as that, or if it's as helpful to someone's life as those are, then they'll do what they feel to do. But I ain't gonna I'm not gonna go crazy. I'm not gonna go crazy messing with y'all, and trying to get y'all to support anything because I know how that goes. I've already been chosen. I've already been liked. So when you're filled with that, I've been liked, I've been loved, and I get chose. So for me, I'm good now, and I can function and start from that basis, and that removes the fear or the insecurity or yeah, man, why is this 70 or 80 people or 90 people were there and only 20 click like or 30 click like, but there's a bunch of comments. There was more than 20 or 30 comments in the thing. So the people who are commenting ain't even clicking. Oh, thanks, Alex. I appreciate. Now, I noticed something with that number 3693. I appreciate the super chat. Yeah, yeah. That three energy 3693, 9 and then 3, that's another 3, and then 9, and that gives you 12, and then 1 plus 2 is 3. But yeah, so that's why I don't really like I mean, it's good when you do it. It is very helpful, but if you don't, then you don't want to help me. All right, you don't help me then. But I do appreciate super chats. Peace, Julio. Peace. Yeah, indigenous technology. Yeah, that's the name of them. Yeah, and they cool, man. And there's been some that they have copied off of them. You know, they have copied off of those shows. But anyway, or like one caller, we used to always say, anywho. This guy used to call in sometimes. I'm not gonna say where he was from. He might be listening now, and he'd be talking. Yeah, so let me tell you what happened to me, Chief. Anywho, so I was over my friend's house, and she just is a mess. And I said, whatever. Anywho, he used to talk like Wendell from Key and Pill. Wendell the sex addict. He used to talk like that. He used to call in, but I try to, You don't want to laugh at people, but anywho, it takes all types to make the world go round, right? You know what I mean? You know, um, I may say, you see, every 5 minutes, you see. Brother Lowe may say, no, I'm talking about, no, I'm talking about. Yeah, yeah, how you doing? Hey, there, Kashia, sister Kashia. How you doing? Hey there, brother Zach. How you doing? No, I'm talking about, no, I'm talking about. Yeah, so look here. No, I'm talking about. He may do that. You know what I mean? Everybody got they thing. I may do, you see all the time, or those are my three go tos. You see, you know. But Brother Lowe be dropping it in between all of them. Know what I'm talking about? You gotta listen in between. He be giving you some serious history lessons, man. Serious history lessons, man, and linking it together. Yeah, because I'm talking about the German soldiers. Now I'm talking about they wore the same kind of helmet as the ancient Roman soldiers. And you go, oh yeah, you're right. Brother's deep. You know what I mean? And you got Brother Zach be yelling at you on the camera. Yeah, so Zach be yelling. But Zach be dropping them self-development jewels on you. You know what I mean? Self-development jewels. Everybody has their own thing, and they've all been chosen to build the temple. They all have a capstone on top of their temple, and when those temples all come together, Zach's the drill sergeant. Yeah, and then when you get it, when you had that, then you go over to MGC. You go to Baba Randy, and he's just smooth. Yeah, because yeah, growing up in Oakland, you know what I mean. There's a lot of things that we saw, and we were able to put it into perspective, And yeah, would you agree, Koya? And then his wife, she love her man, and then so. But then you get a lot of jewels on family and relationships. You see, everybody sounds just like him, huh? Everybody has their vibration that they bring. The only person I can't imitate is myself, to be honest with you. I don't know how I sound, but my children be doing it. But I be tagging them so quick before they get it out. you know that you know that almost hurt my feelings once. Though I remember one time my little baby daughter, she was like, because y'all never really see me walk. You only see this part, but people say I have a menacing walk. I don't agree because I think I walk just like everybody else. But everybody says, yeah, you walk like you're getting ready to go hit somebody. And my little daughter, well, she must have been maybe 5 at the time, and she said, Baba, why do you walk like this? I said, what? I said, I don't walk like that, sweetheart. She said, yes, you do. You walk like this. And she hurt my little feelings. My little feelings was hurt. I was like, no, baby, I walk like everybody else. So I don't know. One sister used to say I walk like a lion. I don't know. I guess I got a different kind of walk. I can't. I feel like I'm walking like everybody else, but they say, yeah, you walk like you walk. My cousin says you got a very menacing walk. You can tell that you fight. Like he's like, yeah, the way you fight, you could tell you're a martial artist. You got a very menacing walk. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I look just like y'all when I'm walking, you know. Um, but yeah, man, that self awareness, and sometimes we work on it. I'm a person. If you're ever in the house with me, you hear a lot of booms, boom, boom. You know what that is? I'm always running into door jams all day. I hit the doors all the time. You know why I hit the doors all the time? Because I think I'm a size L. I think I'm a large when I'm more like a 3X, 2X, 3X. So a lot of times I don't know how wide my shoulders actually are. So I'll be thinking like I'm just squeezing through. Oh, let me just get by you real quick. Boom! Let me just get by knocking people over. I do that all the time. And you would think by now, that's what we're talking about. Um, Self awareness, right? So y'all didn't know that about me. Now you know some fun facts. Yeah, I tear a house down. I will tear you. Let me come into your house. I will tear the house down from the foundations. Boom, boom. You go into my house, man. All the pictures is crooked on the wall. You be thinking there's some domestic abuse going on. Like, oh man, he must have something happened here last night. You know, you be looking for forensic clues. You're like, nah, ain't nothing happened, man. It's just Baba banging into the walls. He just walked from the kitchen. That's all. He just went from the kitchen to the living room. That's all. And you know, all the pictures is off, man. All the lampshades is crooked, you know. So yeah, I'm still working on that. You know, we all got our stuff that we got to work on. Yeah, I be abusing the walls, you know, because I think that I'm much smaller than than I am. You know, I rip a lot of shirts in stores too. Oh, this could fit. This definitely. Put that back. Put it back. Put it back. You know, but yeah, so we just got to come out of that fear, man. We got to recognize that we are all here, all of you in this group, 75 of you who are here. Oh, you thought I forgot the subject? You thought I was rambling, didn't you? Come on, look at, watch Daddy work. I know what I'm doing. You know, all 74, said the 75th just leave. Well, go on, leave then with your funky ass. We don't need you anyway. 74 is fine. That adds it because you take the 7 and the 4, you add it up, you get 11. Now, the 11 is a divine gateway. You see what I'm saying? So when we look at the 11, we're looking at the towers. We're looking at duality. We're looking at this at left and right. When you look at the human body, it's primarily based off of duality. That's the energy of the Libras. You know, so most of those Libraic energies, they want everything in doubles. You see what I'm saying? Oh, we're back to 75. All right, scratch everything I just said. Never mind. 75 is a divine number because when you add the 7 and the 5 together, you get the 12. Nah, the 12 apostles. Back to 74. Well, you know, sometimes 74 is more supreme. Oh, 73. Oh, man. 73 to 7 and 3 equals to 10. And then 10 allows us to repeat. 72. Oh, man. Now we at 9. 71. Oh, good Lord. All right. So now we at the number 8. The number 8 represents infinity. Not only does it represent infinity, it represents the fullness of carrying labor to full term. You see what I'm saying? So 71 is actually a more divine number than 75. So scratch what I said earlier, okay? Yeah, take your butts to work. You four people that that's what it is. You ain't gonna log into your to work. But yeah, man. Oh, we're back to 72. So you know, the 9, we gotta deal with the 9 ether. You know. But but yeah, man. So we got to come out of our fear mechanisms and recognize you've been chosen. You are already one of the chosen. You know, if you're here building the temple in the temple of the Most High, instead of off the chain today, huh? If you're building the temple of the Most High, you are the chosen because the temple of the Most High is you. You are that house. You are that home. Yeah, bars. See, it said bars. I said, hey, yo. Hey, yo. That's how you got to start. When you freestyle rhyming, that's how you start out. Hey, yo. I said, you is a butter, not a butter. Just I say something stupid. But anyway, you eat potatoes, potatoes mashed, mashed potatoes, potatoes yams, yams mashed potatoes, potatoes. I eat them. I eat them. I eat them up like I eat MC. but coming out of those, y'all laughing the whole doggone segment. But coming out of those fear mechanisms, you got to recognize that the chosen are the ones who are building that temple, and the temple contains certain components and constituents that that provide for a certain measure of interoperability between all of them. Pardon, it's happening again. I don't know what that means. Okay, Chief this morning, huh? Yeah. I hope y'all listening. I hope you learning something. I hope you learning something. Are you learning something? Are you getting over your fear of not being chosen? Have you done that? Are we back to 75 again? Yeah, so that's what I was trying to tell y'all before the 75. We don't go through that again, don't worry. But if you're here, You hear, there we go, Fase. I'm chosen. So now you're chosen to do what? Just to be fly? Are you chosen just because I'm great? Are you self chosen? No, you ain't self chosen. You didn't choose yourself. That's the important thing that you got to understand. You don't just hop up one day and I'm a god, I'm a goddess, I'm a king, I'm a queen. I'm the divine chosen people. It doesn't work that way. No different than how that sperm cell couldn't just say I'm going to be the one to fertilize. You might have got there first, but it doesn't mean that you're the one that egg chose. You see. So you're chosen, your choosing began there. And remember that the sperm is nothing but a thought. It's an intention, you know. And if you can impress as a man within that liquid, because liquid is so highly programmable, if you can impress within that liquid your intention of greatness, your intention of love, your intention of belongingness, and your intention. Now we at 77. Let me, I'll go through it again. I'll give it to you again. I'll show you. 77 is an angelic number. But if you can impress upon that particular liquid and that libational energy or libational, um, your intention of love, your intention of togetherness, your intention of building, your intention of vision, then now it starts off before it's even chosen. It already starts off knowing its placement in the universe. So not only does it know its placement in the universe, but then on top of that, it then gets chosen. So is it concerned later that Malik Washington didn't choose you to be on the basketball on his squad, or Shanika Grayson didn't pick you to play on her softball or her whatever thing, whatever, I don't know what the girls play, or whatever thing. No, I've already been chosen. I'm already an architect. I'm already building the temple of the Most High. And I already have my symbol and my character that I've been implanted with. Now, what is your character? Your character is a glyph. Glyph and character is the same thing. Now, you've heard that word glyph before, right? Remember? Hieroglyph, hieroglyph, hieroglyph. What is hiero? Sacred. What is glyph? Writing. You see? And then we spoke about that before. I think it was yesterday where somebody had put the word pyramid in the trap, pyramid in the chat. And I said that, pyramid comes from pyro. Pyro is fire, mid is middle. So you can have pyroglyphs or pyroglyphs, fire glyphs. A glyph or a writing or marking. A glyph is a character. Character and glyph are the same thing, right? So you can have a glyph or a character that has been emblazoned in fire within your matrix, within your internal matrix. You see, that's what we were looking at when we were looking at the top. What's all the way up there? What's the most high character? What's the most high glyph that exists within my psyche? Well, that's what I'm here to manifest. That's what I'm here bringing forth. And I've already been chosen to do that. I'm not choosing myself. You see, it's already been implanted in fire. That's why he said, yo, when I come back next time, I'm not coming back with water. I'm coming back with fire. That's why we have pyramids. But we're looking at the building and we're not realizing, wow, man, that's beautiful the way they put the bricks together and the shape of the pyramid and this and that. Player, that's your body. The inner chambers are built like a heart chamber. Why do you call them chambers? It's your heart. You're looking at an image of your body. That's all. You see. So when we're looking at the building of any sacred temple, even if it's Sol Oman or the hidden sun, or as some of you like to say, Solomon, even if you're looking at the building of Sol Oman's temple, you're actually looking at the building of you as the temple of the Most High, as the container of the Most High, as a housing of the Most High. Or as it said before, in my house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. In my father's house there are many mansions. Well, when you take that word mansions and you look at it in the Hebrew, the word mansions translates into dwelling places. Now you would have thought that they could have updated that by now, so people could get a better understanding. Why they still got to say in mansions when you go back and you retranslate it and it says dwelling places? So the dwelling places are actually people. So that's why then when it says later, you are the temple of the Most High, you don't know how to make the connection. So you thinking one day I'm gonna die and peace aloe, and I'm gonna go to heaven and I'm gonna live inside of something. And you don't understand that that something is already living inside of you, because it chose you to create this empire. You're already a part of the kingdom, but it's now saying, now you take all of these different temples, you put them together, you build kingdoms, and you take those kingdoms and you put them together, you build empires. You were born to be an empire builder. You see, don't worry about if you were not chosen or you'll get rejected at a job. They didn't choose you at your birth. They didn't know you at your birth. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you do. They don't have a clue. You know, they only know what they can use you for. Don't worry about if that boyfriend didn't choose you, or that girlfriend didn't choose you, or you got down on your knee. Don't get down on your knee and propose to nobody. But you got down on your knee and you proposed, and someone said, "Nah, I'm not ready," or "I don't think so," or you sat with that brother and said, "Look, I'm late," and he said, "What you mean you late?" And you said, "I'm late. You know, we gonna have a baby," and he jetted out. You know, he didn't choose you. He doesn't know you. What is he rejecting you from when you've already been accepted in? If you've already been accepted in, where are you going? Why are you now going out to these people who don't know you to seek approval when you've already been approved? Because the egg said, "I want that one. Give me that one. That one." You know when you go to the mall and you take your little greedy daughter and you show her stuff in the mall, and you got one thing here and another thing there, and this one's a little cheaper price, and she said, "I want that one, Daddy." "Well, what about that one?" "I said that one." You see, you've already been chosen. Why you want that one? You see, why do you want this one? Why you want that one? Why don't you just be? And your being is not tied up in your doing, because, like I said, you ain't gonna be able to do forever. It's always gonna change. It's gonna change. You know, your words. There'll come a moment where your words aren't so eloquent. There'll come a moment where you're not so organized on your job, or you don't command the same respect. There'll come a moment when your children are no longer small and they don't have to sit and listen to you, and your identity can no longer be tied up in being father or being mother, or being the supervisor or being the director of this or the head of that, or the first black this or the first female that or the first this that. All of that will pass. All of that is transient. It's all transient, and then you'll have to get to a moment at some point where somebody will even have to say it. "You know who that is? That's the. You don't know who that is? I don't know who that is." We all will get to that moment. All of us. You see, this is the reason why I don't really. One of the reasons I don't really use my titles in my Ifa name like that. What does it mean to you? Doesn't mean anything to you if you're not dealing with Ifa. You see, that doesn't matter. What matters and what signifies my identity is the freedom that I express through allowing the spirit to function through me. That's where my crown comes from. You see, when I allow the creative spirit to function through me, and I do that consistently, that's what I am. Because in that moment, I ain't doing nothing. I'm being something. If the creator's cracking jokes, then creator's cracking jokes. It doesn't mean that today is a great day for me. It doesn't mean that everything is going right for me today. It ain't. I shoot. Look at my table right there. I got a stack of responsibilities on that table right there. Half of them ain't even organized. I gotta go and move stuff around and reorganize, scan some receipts in, stuff like that. I got a whole bunch of stuff that I got to do in front of me. Everything ain't perfect. Whole time I've been doing this video, I keep doing this because it's something in my eye. I've been doing the whole video with something in my eye the whole time. You notice I keep doing this. Everything ain't perfect. Nobody promised that everything was gonna be perfect. But even when everything is not perfect, got something in my eye, got receipts that I gotta organize into my accounting software, got bills that I need to send off, and oh man, yeah, I gotta go pay some land taxes today that I forgot to go pay. So I gotta go call one of the municipalities and send in that payment. Stuff to do. I still itching. Not itching, but there's something down in there. You know, got a big lump of shea butter in my eye, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Everything's not going to be perfect, but you know what is perfect? My heart. My heart is perfect. You see, because my heart has a will to transform and regenerate myself based on what it is that I'm sharing. You see, and you can be and do the same thing, and I urge you to be and to do the same thing. And like I said earlier, some of you may have missed that, things are changing, man, and doors are closing. So a lot of you who've been playing around, jumping in and out, you still want to be ignorant, but you want to know some stuff, or you want the EFOT information because you want to go be a jackass, but then want to still feel like if I'm a jackass with an E-Day on or a jackass with a Lekes on, then jackass consequences won't come back to my door. And then you come back to me, Chief, this is what happened to me. What should I do? The same thing I told you to do before, because I only got one message for those of you who are not doing what you're supposed to do. Do what you're supposed to do. Then we could start talking about the finer points of how you do it. But until you decide to commit yourself to recognizing I am chosen, and there's a certain integrity and a certain quality that I have to walk through the world with, until you come to that space, no one can do anything with you. You're going to keep getting tore up by the world. You're going to keep having all kind of gorillas and jackals and beasts beat all over you. That's just what's going to happen. You see, and that's not your cross to bear. A lot of times we say that, man, we suffer all kind of tragedies and things in our life, and we say, well, that's just, that's just the cross I have to bear. No, it's not. You don't have to. Certain things, no. Certain things that are abnormal. Certain things you don't have to go through. No, that's not the actual cross. That is not the actual cross. There is a cross, but that ain't it. Those are consequences that you're bearing. That's what that is. Because you want to do it your way and you want to do it in your time. And your heart isn't perfect. And that's the only thing you're going to be able to perfect in this lifetime. You can't perfect nothing else. Everything else is dying. I probably got like a million microbes on me right now, eating away, eating away at my flesh. I'm just a big, gigantic piece of rotting flesh. I'm rotting right now as I'm speaking to you, and you're rotting right now as you're listening. Dig that. But your spiritual heart is perfect. It's perfect, and it's going to remain perfect with or without you. You see, so you can either jump onto that, and that's where we can link up, or you can keep rotting and dying out here and fermenting and just be fertilizer for us doing the next thing. You could be that. All right. So yeah, man. I know this was heavy. I know there's a lot of hurtful things in there. And you'd be like, oh, that's why he's cracking all them jokes, because he's about to hurt my feelings. But yeah, man. So move beyond the fear. And like I said, some things you got to do trembling. It's okay to do a trembling. Don't be nervous. I mean, if you're nervous, nervousness and fear is two different things. If you're nervous, you're excited about something. But you know, don't let fear stop you. There's a lot of things that I still do trembling. There's a lot of things that you're gonna do scared, but you do it, and that's what signifies courage. Courage ain't, yeah, I could do that, whatever, whatever. No, that's not courage. That's bravery. You know, courage is like, what was that? There's a cartoon, I think, Courage the Cowardly Dog or something like that. You know, you might be afraid, you might be scared, but you're gonna do it. You see, building a temple is a monumental task. You're welcome, Adrian. You're welcome, YG Gutter. You're welcome, James Gatabaki. You're welcome, Quinde. You're welcome, Ia Aldere. You're welcome, brother Kevin Godby. Yeah, man. You're all welcome. You hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear what I said? You're all welcomed. Some of you notice that a lot of times when you send me messages and stuff, that's how I respond. You're welcomed. Nobody ever asked me about that though. You probably think it's a typo. What's the difference between me saying you're welcome and you're welcomed? Obviously, one is specifying past tense. You've been welcomed. I've been welcomed you in. I've already forgiven you. I've already forgiven you. What is forgiveness? To forgive love. I've already given it to you. I've already welcomed you. Thanks, Chief. You're welcomed. Come on. Come on. That's what it means. Not you're welcome for more. For more. I'm not saying future tense. Thanks, Chief. You're welcome. For what? For more instruction? No, you're not welcome to more instruction. There'll be a time when that will shut off for you. You're welcomed. I already invited you in. Come on, let's go. Some of you still out here messing around. And then at 4 a.m. sending me mug shots because somebody beat you up. And mug shots of the person. I know I'm supposed to now do a ritual for you. No. No. The door is closing. The door is closing. All right. All right. So we've been on for a very long time. And really, like I said, today, I felt like I wanted to keep it light to some degree, um, because I really want you to work with those symbols. I really want you to work with that meditation, and I don't want to get in the way too much of that experience for you. You know, um, I want you to start experiencing how your system is speaking to you, and how those signs of spirit are coming to you, and being able to differentiate, because all spirit ain't good spirit, all ancestors ain't good ancestors. In fact, most of them ain't. It's just like people, as above, so below, as within, so without. You go into most environment, only 5% of the people there are actually righteous. Well, it's the same thing in the spiritual world. Just because something's a spirit doesn't mean it's benevolent. You know, only a couple of them are worth anything. You know, so 9 times out of 10, it's good just to don't even mess with none of them. I know. That's not what you heard, but that's what it is. That's what it is, man. The best ones will absorb themselves into your temple. That's why you build a temple to house the spirit of the Most High. So if you're building a temple, you know, uh, unrighteousness is not going to come inside. It's hallowed ground, but righteousness is welcome. So you become your own filter. You see what I'm saying? All right, everyone, be well today, please. Be safe today. Keep storing up that food, like I told you before. Keep putting those hard commodities to the side, like I told you before. It's not over. All right. So I just want to reiterate that before I get off. You're not done. You're not done. Tomorrow I'm gonna go a little heavy in on you. All right. So that's what I'm preparing you. Um, but you keep working with those symbols, and you keep working with your own psychology, and you know, love, inspire, and protect. All right, I mean that. You're welcome. Hope. You're welcome, nigga. Love. Well, you didn't say thank you. You gave me a bunch of black hearts. I don't know what that means. I don't know. Just put a head out on me or what. I'm not good on emojis. All right. But yeah, no doubt, Kashia and everybody else. You have a prosperous day too as well. Ruhia, you know. And Fase, as always. Oh, Black Love. Okay, all right. I got you. Whoop, whoop, Black Love. Got you. All right, I'm still learning. I'm not tight. My emoji game is like super weak. I only know smiley face and smiley face with a wink, and that's about as far as I could go. You know. Yeah, Julio and Maul. Yeah. You're all more than welcome, man. Just apply. Be doers, not just hearers. All right. We're back to that 75. That's the 12. That's the number of completion. All right. So I'm going to complete it right here. All right, everyone. Be well. Peace. Peace. Peace.